Since coming to power, Captain Ibrahim Traore has faced many tests, including attempts on his life to end his rule and the good things he is doing for the people of Burkina Faso. These numerous attempts have pushed him to the wall, which has made him release a list of African leaders whom the West silenced. He believes the same people who silenced those leaders are also after him. Do you think Captain Traore is the best president in Africa right now? And do you think he will survive the West, unlike the other fallen leaders we shall be seeing? Let us know what you think in the comments section below. We begin with someone who made huge waves across Africa and beyond, Muammar Gaddafi. He was born in 1940 with the full name Muammar Mohammed Abu Minyar al-Gaddafi, but most people just know him as Colonel Gaddafi. He first stepped into the spotlight in 1969 when he took control of Libya as a young army officer. Back then he called it a revolution, and he became the main person in charge of the country. At first he led under the name of the Libyan Arab Republic. Then in 1977 he changed things up and created a system he called the Jamahiriya, a long word that basically meant the state of the people. He gave himself the title brotherly leader and stayed in charge for more than 40 years. Gaddafi believed strongly in something called Arab nationalism and socialism, which are big ideas about how countries in the Arab world could work together and share wealth more equally. But over time, he came up with his own set of ideas, a political style that was very different from what most other countries were doing. He called it the Third Universal Theory. It was a mix of his beliefs about power, the people and the economy, and he thought it was the perfect system for Libya. But Colonel Gaddafi wasn't just focused on Libya, he had big dreams for all of Africa. He wanted to see a united continent, where African countries worked together like one big family. He stood up against foreign interference and didn't like the way powerful countries from outside the continent tried to control things. Because of that, he gained a lot of support across Africa, but also made a lot of enemies. One of his biggest contributions was helping to turn the old Organization of African Unity into the African Union. That shift began with something called the Sirte Declaration, signed in 1999 in his hometown Sirte. The African Union officially launched in 2002, and Gaddafi later served as its chairperson for a year, from 2009 to 2010. He wanted to stay in that role longer, hoping to push some big plans for the continent, but things didn't work out the way he expected. Gaddafi's time in power ended in 2011 during a major uprising in Libya. After that, the country went through many changes, trying to rebuild with new leadership. Years later, in 2021, something surprising happened. His son, Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, announced he was running for president. At the time, he was 49 years old, and his decision stirred up a lot of debate, with some people curious about whether the Gaddafi name could return to power. Next up is Captain Traore's own inspiration, someone he takes over from. His name, Thomas Sankara. Born in 1949, he grew up in what was then known as Upper Volta, a country in West Africa that had gained independence but still felt the weight of outside influence. Sankara became a soldier, but he wasn't just any military man. He had big dreams for justice, fairness, and self-reliance, not just for his country, but for all of Africa. In 1983, things started to get tense. Sankara was serving as Prime Minister when a disagreement with the government landed him under house arrest. But that didn't last long. A group of loyal supporters who believed in his vision stepped in and took charge. With their help, Sankara became president at just 33 years old. From the very beginning, he stood out. People started calling him Africa's Che Guevara because of his strong beliefs and bold moves. One of the first things he did, he changed the country's name from Upper Volta, a name left over from colonial times, to Burkina Faso, which means land of honest people. Sankara was all about making real changes. He believed that Africa could take care of itself without always relying on help from richer countries. He pushed for everyone to have access to education, and it paid off. Literacy rates in Burkina Faso skyrocketed during his time in office. He also focused on protecting the environment, improving healthcare, and helping farmers grow more food. His speeches often called on other African nations to stand together and break free from outside control. But not everyone liked the way he did things. His ideas made some powerful people uncomfortable, especially those in other countries who didn't want to lose their influence in Africa. In 1987, just 4 years after he became president, something tragic happened. A new group took over in a sudden power shift, and during that moment, Sankara lost his life. The person who stepped in afterward was someone Sankara had once trusted, his former friend and ally, Blaise Compaoré. Many years later, questions still surrounded what really happened and who was behind it all. Sankara's family and others believed outside forces may have played a role because of his strong stand against foreign control. Even today, people continue to talk about Thomas Sankara. Some saw him as a hero who stood tall for African pride and unity. Others said he could be too strict, especially when it came to different opinions or voices that challenged his ideas. Groups like Amnesty International later pointed out that some of his decisions didn't allow enough space for open debate or freedom of speech. Now let's talk about a man named Samuel Doe, a name that became known across Liberia for both power and controversy. Samuel Doe was born in 1951 and grew up in a rural part of Liberia. He came from the Kran ethnic group and joined the army when he was just 18. He worked his way up, and by the time he was in his late 20s, he had already reached the rank of Master Sergeant. He was young, sharp, and ambitious. In 1980, Liberia was in the hands of President William Tolbert. But something huge was about to happen. Late one night, Doe and a group of soldiers, most of them from his own tribe, stormed the presidential home. What happened next completely changed the course of Liberian history. President Tolbert was removed from power, and just like that, Doe became the new leader. He didn't do it alone. He brought in 14 other young soldiers to help him run things. Together, they called the shots under a military government. One of their first actions was to put a pause on the country's old rules. For 4 years, the constitution was suspended while they worked on creating a new one, which was finally introduced in 1984. The very next year, Liberia held an election, its first since the military takeover. Doe ran for president and claimed victory. But many people watching the election said something didn't feel right. There were lots of reports that the results were unfair, and many believed the election had been rigged. Samuel Doe came from one of Liberia's native tribes, and during his rule, there was growing tension between the local groups and the elite families who had descended from freed American slaves. These families had long held power in Liberia, and Doe wasn't shy about challenging that history. As time went on, things got more difficult. His government faced growing criticism for being corrupt and unfair. Everyday life got harder for many people, and the economy was falling apart. More and more voices, both inside and outside the country, started calling for change. By 1990, Liberia was falling deeper into trouble. Armed groups had started pushing into the capital city, Monrovia. They were fed up with how things were being run and wanted a new start. But even as the pressure mounted, Doe refused to step down. One of the most well-known rebel leaders, Prince Johnson, was leading one of those groups. As the fighting escalated, Doe was eventually captured in a brutal twist of events that shocked the nation. Let's rewind to Egypt in the 1970s, a time when one man was about to make some of the boldest decisions the country had ever seen. His name? Anwar Sadat. Born on Christmas Day in 1918, Sadat grew up in a country ruled by kings, but that was all about to change. In the early 1950s, a group of military officers, including Sadat, decided it was time for something new. Together, they helped bring an end to the rule of King Farouk and started building a new government for Egypt. Fast forward a bit, and Sadat became Egypt's third president in 1970. At first, many people thought he'd simply follow in the footsteps of the president before him. But it didn't take long for Sadat to show that he had his own way of doing things, and he wasn't afraid to shake things up. One of his biggest and most surprising moves? Reaching out to Israel. Since Israel was created in 1948, many countries in the Arab world didn't accept it. But Sadat took a different path. In 1978, he met with Israeli leaders and signed what became known as the Camp David Accords, a plan for peace between the two nations. Then in 1979, Egypt and Israel signed a full peace treaty, becoming the first countries in the region to do so. This decision brought hope for peace, but also sparked outrage. A lot of Egypt's neighbours weren't happy. Many Arab countries pulled away from Egypt, cutting off ties and leaving it isolated from the rest of the region. Still, Sadat stood by his choice. He believed peace was the right path, even if it came at a cost. Then came the unexpected. In October 1981, a big military parade was held in Cairo. The president was there, sitting proudly with his top officials and international guests. It was supposed to be a day of national pride. But during the event, something went terribly wrong. As military vehicles rolled by in perfect formation, one truck suddenly stopped. A group of men jumped out. Not performers, but attackers. They ran straight toward the VIP area and opened fire. The whole parade ground turned into chaos. Security forces tried to respond quickly, but the damage had already been done. The president was hit during the attack, along with several others nearby, including guests who had come from other countries to watch the parade. Now into the heart of Africa, in the 1960s, a time when many countries were trying to break free from colonial rule. One of the loudest voices calling for real freedom came from a young man named Patrice Lumumba. Lumumba wasn't born into power. He was just a regular Congolese man who believed his country deserved better. At the time, the Democratic Republic of Congo, then simply called Congo, was still under the control of Belgium. The people didn't get to make their own decisions, and Lumumba was determined to change that. By 1960, Congo was finally preparing to become independent, and Lumumba rose fast, becoming the country's first prime minister. But even before that, he had already become a powerful voice for independence. He didn't just want Congo to be free in name, he wanted real freedom, where Congolese people would run their own government, without anyone pulling strings behind the scenes. That's where trouble started. When the Belgian government announced a plan for slow, step-by-step elections starting in 1959, Lumumba saw right through it. He believed it was a trick, to keep control by helping only certain loyal leaders win. So he told the people to skip the process altogether. This bold move upset the authorities. Tensions rose quickly, and in October of that year, a major clash broke out in a city called Stanleyville. The situation turned deadly, with lives lost during the unrest. Despite the challenges, Lumumba kept pushing forward. He spoke with passion, demanding respect for the people of Congo and calling for unity across Africa. He dreamed of a country where everyone had a voice, no matter their background. But his ideas scared powerful people, both inside and outside the country. Some foreign governments didn't like how independent he wanted to be. In 1961, just months after becoming Prime Minister, things took a dark turn. A group overthrew him and took him away. He was captured and never made it back home. Behind the scenes, it's believed that other countries played a role in what happened, including Belgium and even some Western powers. Let's head to the Republic of Congo, back in the 1970s, a time when one man, Marien Ngouabi, was calling the shots. Ngouabi became president on January 1st, 1969. He was the country's third leader since it became independent, and he came in with some big ideas about how things should be run. He believed strongly in something called Marxism, a system where the government takes care of most things and tries to make sure everyone is treated fairly and equally, especially when it comes to money and resources. With that in mind, he gave the country a new name, the People's Republic of Congo. But not everyone agreed with how he was running things. Some felt like his leadership favoured certain groups over others, especially when it came to tribal connections. This didn't sit well with many people, including young political activists who wanted a more united and fair government for everyone. Then something shocking happened. On March 18th, 1977, President Ngouabi was suddenly killed while still in office. The country was thrown into confusion. Nobody knew exactly who was behind it, but several people were quickly arrested. Some were even punished in secret, never getting the chance to tell their side of the story. After that, the military stepped in to keep things under control while the country searched for someone new to take the lead. Next up is a man named Laurent Kabila, who once led one of Africa's biggest countries, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Kabila was a revolutionary leader, the kind of person who believed big changes were needed. On May 17, 1997, he took charge of the country after pushing out the longtime leader Mobutu. It was a huge moment for Congo. People were hoping for something better, something new. But soon things got complicated. At first, Kabila had strong support from neighbouring countries like Uganda and Rwanda. But just 1 year later, in 1998, those same allies turned against him. They backed new rebel groups who wanted Kabila out, and a second big conflict, known as the Congo War, broke out. Kabila didn't give up. He found new partners, this time from Angola, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. These countries stepped in to help defend Congo from the west and south, trying to hold things together while Kabila remained in charge. By July 1999, there was finally a bit of hope. Talks between the fighting sides led to a peace agreement. As part of the deal, foreign soldiers who had been in the country started heading home. But when those forces left, it created a new problem. Without them, Congo faced a different kind of danger, this time from within. Then something unexpected and tragic happened. On January 16, 2001, while Kabila was in his office, he was shot and didn't survive. The whole country was left in shock. Just 8 days later, his 29-year-old son, Joseph Kabila, stepped in to lead the country. Let's visit the small East African country of Burundi in the early 1990s, a time when something truly historic was about to happen. A man named Melchior Ndadaye was rising to national attention. He wasn't a soldier or a long-time ruler. He was a teacher, a thinker, and someone who believed deeply in fairness. What made him stand out even more? He became the first person in the history of Burundi to be chosen president through a real democratic vote. For the first time, the people got to decide. Ndadaye came from the Hutu community, one of the two main ethnic groups in the country. For many years, Burundi had been led by presidents from the Tutsi group, and tensions between the two communities had grown for decades, especially after violent conflicts in the 1970s that left deep scars. Ndadaye had lived through all of that, and he dreamed of a peaceful future where people from both groups could live and work together without fear. Once in office, he started putting plans in place to make that dream real. Plans for fairness, for unity, and for real change. But not everyone was ready for that change. Just a few months into his presidency, on October 21st, 1993, something shocking happened. Members of the military, claiming they were just following protocol, took Ndadaye and several top leaders to a secure location. But what happened next left the entire country stunned. The president and his team never came back. His sudden death lit a fire across Burundi. The hope people had only just begun to feel was quickly replaced by anger and heartbreak. Have you heard of a man named Sylvanus Olympio, a leader from Togo who believed in doing things his own way, even if it meant going against the grain? Olympio was born in 1902, back when his hometown Lomé was still under German colonial rule. He later went on to study in London at one of the top schools for economics, so it's safe to say he knew a thing or two about money, politics, and how the world worked. When Togo gained independence, Olympio became its very first president, and people often called him the father of independence for good reason. He had big dreams of building a strong, self-reliant country. But he didn't want Togo to be too dependent on France, even though many other former French colonies were still closely tied to their old rulers. One of his boldest moves, he wanted to create a brand new currency just for Togo, something totally separate from the one used in French-speaking African countries. This idea made some people very nervous, especially those in power who didn't want things to change. But that wasn't the only problem. There were also tensions inside the country. Some Togolese soldiers who had served in the French army wanted jobs in the new Togolese military. Olympio, trying to keep the army small and costs low, didn't bring many of them in. That decision left a lot of people frustrated, and some of them angry enough to take matters into their own hands. Then came the night of January 12th, 1963. Just before midnight, a group of armed men stormed the president's house. There weren't many guards around, and the attackers moved quickly. Olympio, realizing something was wrong, managed to slip away and ran toward the US embassy nearby, hoping it would be a safe place to hide. But by morning, the situation had turned tragic. Outside the gates of the embassy, Sylvanus Olympio's body was found. The man who had helped lead Togo to independence had been taken down in a sudden and heartbreaking twist. Let's go back to a very tense and tragic moment in East Africa. April 6th, 1994. That evening, a small jet was flying toward Kigali, the capital of Rwanda. It was supposed to land for a quick stop before continuing on to Burundi. But something went terribly wrong. On board were two important leaders, Juvenal Habyarimana, the president of Rwanda, and Cyprien Ntaryamira, the president of Burundi. As the plane got close to the runway, it was suddenly hit and brought down from the sky. The crash shocked the entire region. But in Rwanda, where people had already been on edge, it lit a match in the middle of a room full of dry leaves. You see, Rwanda had deep divisions between two major ethnic groups, the Hutus and the Tutsis. These tensions had been building for years, and when the plane went down, everything exploded. In the weeks that followed, chaos and violence spread faster than anyone could stop it. The result was one of the darkest chapters in modern history. Over the next few months, hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives. Most were Tutsis, but many moderate Hutus were also caught in the storm simply for standing in the way. Even today, people are still asking, who brought down the plane? There are two major sides to the story. One says the attack was carried out by hardliners from the president's own group, Hutu extremists, who wanted an excuse to go after the Tutsis. Another version points fingers at a group of Tutsi rebels, with some saying the operation was ordered by Paul Kagame, who later became Rwanda's president. Let's take a trip back to Nigeria in the 1970s, when the country was being led by a tough, no-nonsense military officer named General Murtala Muhammed. He wasn't your typical leader. Murtala was bold, quick to act, and made some big changes in a very short time. A lot of people admired him for shaking things up, but not everyone was on board with his style. On the morning of February 13th, 1976, something unexpected happened. Murtala was riding through Lagos, Nigeria's busy capital, in his official car, a black Mercedes. It seemed like just another day. But suddenly his vehicle was blocked in traffic. That's when a group of armed men, led by a soldier named Buka Suka Dimka, stepped in and opened fire. It was all part of a secret plan to take over the government. Thinking the plan had worked, Dimka rushed to the national radio station. He grabbed a mic and began making an announcement, saying the country had a new leader and explaining why they had taken over. But things didn't go the way he imagined. Before he could finish his message, security forces came rushing in. Dimka just barely got away. He stayed hidden for a while, but not for long. A few months later, on May 15th, 1976, the military tracked him down. He was arrested, along with others involved in the plot, and they were all brought to justice. That same day of the attack, other top leaders like General Olusegun Obasanjo and General Theophilus Danjuma were also in danger. The attackers had plans to target them too. But luckily, they had stayed behind that morning and never left their homes as early as Murtala did. The warning over the radio might have saved their lives. Let's head over to the small West African country of Guinea-Bissau, where one man seemed to come and go from power like a character in a dramatic movie. His name was João Bernardo Vieira, but most people just called him Nino. He first showed up on the national stage in 1980, not through an election, but through a quiet military takeover. It was quick and no one got hurt. Just like that, Vieira became the leader of Guinea-Bissau. He held on to that position for nearly 20 years, with just a tiny break in between. But things didn't stay smooth forever. In 1999, he was pushed out of office and went into exile, leaving the country behind. But Nino wasn't done yet. In 2005, he made a surprising comeback. This time, he returned not as a soldier, but as a democratically elected president. People were shocked, but he had managed to reclaim the seat once again. Then in March 2009, something deeply unsettling happened. One day, the head of the army, General Batista Tagme Nawai, was killed by an explosion at his home. It was sudden and violent, and the entire country was shaken. But what came next was even more shocking. Just one day later, President Vieira was attacked in his own home. Reports say a group of soldiers broke in during the early hours, and what followed was a brutal end. Many believed it wasn't random. Whispers spread quickly. People said it was payback for what had happened to the general. Now let's head to the West African country of Niger, where one military leader's rise to power ended in a very sudden and shocking fall. His name was General Ibrahim Traore Mainassara. He wasn't always in charge. In fact, he took control in 1996 by leading a military takeover that removed Niger's first elected president from office. Just like that, Traore went from being a general to becoming the head of the whole country. But leading a nation isn't easy, especially when people are struggling. During his time in office, the country's economy was in big trouble. Many workers hadn't been paid in months, and frustration was rising fast. Even though people around him, including political leaders and even military insiders, urged him to step down, Traore wouldn't budge. Then came April 9th, 1999. On that day, something unexpected happened at Niamey Airport, right in the heart of the capital. As General Traore was reportedly trying to leave the country, something went terribly wrong. Members of his own security team turned on him. Within moments, the man who once led the country was gone. Official reports tried to downplay it. The Prime Minister at the time even called it a tragic accident. But many people believed otherwise. The streets were filled with whispers, and questions swirled about what really went on behind the scenes. His family took care of his burial quietly, with little ceremony. If you found this video interesting, be sure to hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe.